ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः। ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः। देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः। So we are on this 7th chapter. And in this 7th chapter, so far we saw that the Lord said that all the 8 aspects of creation, the 5 elements, mind, intellect, and the ego, these 8 factors constitute the creation and they have come out from the Lord. And by themselves, these 8 factors are inert. What enlivens them is the life, the presence of consciousness. So the 8 factors, Ashtadha Prakriti, is the lower nature of the Lord, and that which enlivens it is the higher nature, which is the consciousness. And so as consciousness, he binds the whole world, and the example that he had given was in that verse number 7 of the pearls and the string, so the necklace. So the pearls may be different sizes, colors, shapes, but the string or the thread that runs through all of them is one. In the same way, there is so much of diversity in the whole creation, but what binds all of us together is that one pure consciousness. Now, going further, he also said, why is this being explained that the whole creation has come out of the Lord? So that we understand that that which is infinite is not something which is just some abstract and something which we can't relate to. If the whole creation has manifested from that, it's an appearance of that, then the Lord alone is everywhere. So how to recognize Him? So many examples are given here, that in the water He is the taste, in the sun and the moon He is the light, and He is the Om in all the Vedas. So different expressions were given. What is the idea here is whenever we see, let us say the sun, or we drink water, or we have the smell of the earth when the rain is going to come, we are able to appreciate that these are all expressions of the divine. So our buddhi connects to the presence of the Lord more and more and more. And whatever we think about, the buddhi takes the shape of that actually. The thoughts, they take the shape of that. So if I see that this is a watch, how do I know this is a watch? Through the mind, through the eyes, the mind has gone out, enveloped the object, and there is the shape of that object in my mind. So the thought is of the shape of the watch, and then there is a name associated with it. And that thought is enlivened by consciousness. So every thought that we think takes the shape of the object of the thought. Otherwise we will not know it. So whenever we connect to the earth as earth, that is one way to connect. But if the bhav is that this is an expression of the divine, then I am not only seeing it as earth, I am also connecting to the divinity. And hence so many examples are given to us here to be able to recognize the divine everywhere. Here a few examples only are given. But these are samples. And we can apply this principle here that the essential nature of that thing, without which that thing cannot remain, that is the expression of the Lord in that thing. So in fire it is heat and light, in water it is the sapidity, it is the taste. In this bench it is the wood and the capacity to hold something. In the clock it is the time. In everything, when I see the object but my mind is reminded of the Lord, what is happening? Every time I do that, I am connecting to the divine. I am going beyond the form into the essence of that nature thing. Because there is no other way to connect to that Supreme which is infinite. Some medium has to be used. So for a devotee it may begin with one form, and then if that is considered as divine, then it will expand to fill the whole universe after that. So divinity is to be associated with that thing. Same way in our own body. So we say that the body is the temple of the Lord. So the moment I see this body, I relate to this body, but I think that this is the temple of the Lord and the Lord resides in the heart, my whole attitude towards the body will change. No more will I start indulging or abusing the body. I will use it in the best possible way. Keep it in the best way possible. I will not torture this body. So the thought of divinity, when it is associated with something, not only we connect with the divine, but also we move away from the tendency to misuse it, abuse it, just to exploit it as some object meant for my pleasure. Divinity gets associated with that thing. So my usage, my relationship, everything changes. When we say Matru Devo Bhava, may mother be God unto you. Now when I see the mother as the first teacher or the first expression of the Lord in my life, my whole association is different. Because I have associated divinity there. Hence these examples are given. One is the external examples, then he goes on to the subtler aspects where he says that I am the life in everybody, I am the tapascha asmi tapasvishu, I am the austerity in those who are practicing austerity. I am the seed of all the beings, I am the intelligence of all the beings, I am the splendor of all the beings. So one more beautiful aspect which happens is we start understanding that everything comes from the divine and we don't arrogate anything to ourselves. So that surrender comes about very naturally. That if I have a beautiful thought and I am writing some beautiful composition or a poem or I am creating something wonderful, one is the joy of creating it, but deeply I must know that this has happened through me and not by me. It is the divine expression which has happened through me. Because that intelligence or that creativity, that love, etc. came from the Lord. So in that way, in and through all my actions, in and through all my relationships, through all my thoughts, through all my emotions, this is called divinizing our emotions, divinizing our thoughts and divinizing our actions. Then the Lord is not away from me somewhere far. Minute by minute I am associating. Now he goes on, some more subtler examples he gives, and very two beautiful and most important verses of this chapter. Verse number 11 and then 12. Balam balavatam asmi kamaraga vivarjitam dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. So he says here, Balam Balavatam Asmi. I am the strength in the strong. And what is that strength? Kama Raga Vivarjitam. That which is devoid of selfishness and attachment. So I am the strength of the individual which is born when selfishness and attachment goes away. I am the strength in the strong. And he also says, I am the desire in the person. Kamaha asmi. What type of desire? Dharma aviruddha. That desire which is not against or opposed to dharma. So two beautiful points here. One, he says, I am the strength in the strong. At one level, even the physical strength comes from the Lord. Because the food that we eat, when it transforms, who transforms all that is the Lord. And the strength also comes from the Lord, food comes from the Lord, everything comes from the Lord. But here he is referring to the mental strength. So generally we find that in the world, selfishness, ambition, achievement is considered as strong. And we see here in the world also that those who are selfless, those who are detached, one thinks that is weakness. If I am selfless, I am weak, or I will be taken for granted. If I am detached, then I won't have enthusiasm or interest in life. So strength comes from achievement, strength comes from success, strength comes from desiring certain things. I am a strong personality. I can get whatever I want done somehow. Doesn't matter, but I will get it done. Such a go-getter is considered as very strong. Not that is not at all strength, but at a higher level, what is the real strength of a person is this: Kama Raga Vivarjita. As a finite individual, I may be strong to achieve what I want to achieve. I may have a goal in my mind and single pointed effort I put and I will achieve what I want to achieve. And I feel I am very strong and capable and successful. But how much a person can achieve that way is always limited compared to what a selfless person can achieve. If you see the strength of Hanumanji is one example. That he did all things which were actually impossible. Durgam karya jagat ke jete. All the impossible things actually. Lifted the mountain, crossed over the ocean, went up to the sun, tried to swallow the sun. So many things he did. Single-handedly he destroyed the whole Ashok Vatika. So much he did. But what was his strength? Was there a selfish motive which was his strength? No. For whom did he do all that? He said, for the sake of the Lord. So where selflessness comes and detachment comes, that is real strength in a person's life. We suffer because of our attachments. We don't realize that. That attachment leads to sorrow, and sorrow makes us weak. And still we feel that, how can I not be attached? Because we equate attachment to love. But attachment is not equal to love. To the extent I am attached, to that extent I am miserable. If I am not attached to anything, I have no cause for sorrow. And such a person is the strongest, because that person will work without any fear, insecurity, misery, without anything, any stress and worry. So to the extent I am attached, to that extent I have all the other six also. Desire, greed, jealousy, intoxication, delusion, passion, all these. So attachment brings its own attachments with it and makes us weak. So when he says here, I am the strength in the strong, what is the strength in the really strong people? Is the strength which is born out of selflessness and detachment. Kama and Raga. So Kama is symbolic of desire for acquiring what I don't have, and attachment is symbolic of preserving what I have and I don't want to let it go. So acquiring what I don't have and preserving what I have takes away most of our energy. Think about it, how much Diwali cleaning we would have actually done. To let go of something so difficult. Clean it, put it back. Why? No, this is so important. My mother-in-law gave this to me. I don't know whether, not mother-in-law, my mother gave this to me. My mother gave this to me. This is our family's tradition, dharovara, whatever. You may not use it only, but no, this is very important. Some attachment is there. Attachment to people, attachment to things, insistence on certain ways the things have to be. So the more we are attached, the more weaker we become. So as a spiritual student, if I have clarity that selflessness is equal to strength, the more selfless a person is, the more fearless a person is. You think about it, because there is nothing to lose. Person who is selfish and who is attached is always scared that I will lose something, what I have, or I may not get what I need. Lives in fear and worry. So here he says that Kama Raga Vivarjitam, I am that strength in the strong, which is free. And real strength, when people have power, very few people are those who are actually free from attachment to that power also. That is real strength, where I have power but I am not attached to power. That I can use power for the sake of the welfare of people. And only such people know how to use power. So generally you may have heard the saying, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is applicable in the case of those who do not have this Kama Raga Vivarjita. If I am selfless, power can never corrupt a selfless person. Because the person knows that this power is to be utilized for the welfare of the people around, or for whatever reason I have been given that power, it is only to be used for that. What was that movie? Spider-Man's movie, no? With great power comes great responsibility. That is this. That how that power, when it is there, when will I use it responsibly? When I have a larger vision. If I am going to use power for myself, projection, very soon there will be misuse of that power. And there will be greed, there will be corruption, there will be insecurity, all the problems will start. So from the spiritual standpoint, we always say that this line to practice in my life, if we say Gita in practice, then what is the practice? That can I wield power with selflessness and detachment. That whatever power, all of us have been given power by the Lord. And we have a power, we have that capacity to make a difference using that power. To my own family members, to the society around me, in my work, in my profession, wherever I am having, power does not have to be only some designation. So many different powers we have. The power of knowledge we have, power of love we have, so many other powers we have, creativity, innovation, so many different powers we have. If we can use all those without selfishness and without attachment. And how that is possible? When we genuinely are interested in the welfare of others. No, but what about me? Vedanta says that if I make others happy, my insecurity only will end. If I try to keep myself happy, no matter what I do, I will still remain insecure. And nothing is enough. Not that I should never do anything for my happiness, but the focus should not be on I. The more it is on I, the more is the suffering. So the practice of this is, whatever power I have, can I use it for the well-being of people around me? Power to write, power to speak, power to create. So many different powers. So in the world we find that, might is right is the outlook generally. The worldly outlook is might is right. Whoever has power, that person can get anything done. So such people are considered as very strong. But in the spiritual realm, we always say that right is might. That dharma, from dharma comes the real strength. And that's why the next line he says, dharma aviruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. Any desire which is not violating dharma, I am that desire, O Arjuna. So dharma is a very, very great strength. Integrity. In today's world, we can use the word integrity. When there is integrity in one's conduct, individually if there is an integrity in thought, word and deed, so much of strength. What I think is what I speak and what I do. There is no gap. In so many different cultures it is there. This aspect of integrity. In our culture it is called as satyam, intellectual honesty. That I live up to my intellectual conviction, I do not compromise. That gives a lot of strength to a person. Even a little compromise we fall in our own eyes. When I know what is right and I do the opposite of it, or I don't follow it 100%, to the extent I don't follow it, to that extent I become weaker. So here the strength comes from this conviction, the strength comes from that dharma, strength comes from this capacity to live without any compromise. So dharma aviruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. One of the ways to cultivate, this selflessness, what we saw in the earlier line, that kama raga vivarjitam. So one practice which we can do is, am I doing my duty without desire for praise and without insistence on result? Then the duty becomes a means to purify the mind. So all my duties which are given to me, without kama and raga. Kama is desire. That my desire is what? Somebody should praise me, somebody should appreciate me, somebody should applaud me, somebody should return the love that I am giving them, or in a specific way they should express that love. So that is kama. And raga is to get attached to that person or to that response. Even in one relationship I can try. The relationship in which I am most secure, I can start with that. Can I learn to be selfless in that relationship, that the thought of what will I get doesn't come to my mind? Try doing that and you will see how much of freedom that is. And that is a real strength. The mind which is not expecting anything is such a strong mind. Nobody can disappoint that mind. You just think about it, so many great saints, people like Buddha or Jesus or Shankaracharya or Vivekananda or Mirabai, so many of them, Sakubai, so many of these people, they want nothing from anybody. And they go on serving. Our own Gurudev expected nothing from people. And in one place he wrote also that I am a mad lover. I expect nothing from you. Even if you hate me, I will keep on loving you. because that's my nature, is to love. You just think what is the strength of that person. Any amount of criticism, person will not take it personally and feel that how much I did for this society, what did they give me in return. That thought only will not cross the mind. Why? Because the very act of doing that duty, the very act of loving, the very act of sharing what one has, that itself is a joy. And all of us have experienced that joy some time or the other. It is not that we have not. When the child is small, the mother just loves so selflessly. There is nothing that the mother needs. How strong the mother is. But the moment expectation comes, gone. Somebody who loves the country, they did, so many people volunteered and did so much for the elections which happened, Lok Sabha elections and even this state elections and all that. So selflessly, because they were got inspired, ki, come on, there is some hope now. And they worked selflessly. Very happy. So the person who is able to do that is a very strong person. So we can try. The purpose for which the Lord has placed us where we are, whether in a family or in a professional situation or wherever it is, the real purpose of work is to cultivate this kama raga vivarjitam, the capacity to live without dependency and without selfishness. To the extent that thought comes to my mind that what will I get out of it? What did I get when I did so much for people? To that extent I should know that I am yet to improve. I still have to put in that sadhana to become selfless. Because if you see in nature, of course that limitation of example is there. And in nature nobody asks that question. Does the tree ever ask that question? That what did I do for the society and what did I get in return? No. It's a very beautiful shloka which says, Paropakaraya vahanti nadyaha. For the sake of service to others, the rivers are flowing. Phalanti vrikshaha. The trees are giving fruits. Duhanti gavaha. The cows are giving milk. Paropakarartham idam shariram. This body is made for service to people. And that is real strength. So he says, Dharma, Balam balavatam asmi, Kama, Raga, Vivarjitam. Our attitude is, even when we pray to Bhagwan, we say, Bhagwan ko itne nariyal chadaye, kya mila? Nariyal hi waste hua aur kuch nahi mila. To be free from that thought of what did I get is the purpose of sadhana actually. Anyway, one will come to that slowly, but that is what one has to keep in mind, that selflessness is the real strength in a person's life, and never ever a person who is selfless will feel weak. You know why we feel weak when we are selfless? Because to the extent of selflessness in us is lesser than the selfishness. So the extent of selfishness which is more always makes me feel insecure that if you are selfless you will be taken for a ride. A selfless person is not a dumb person. We always equate smartness we equate goodness to dumbness. If you are a good person, you are a dumb person. And in today's world, you can't be a dumb person. You have to be a smart person. Smart person means anyhow you should be able to manipulate and get your way. Then you are a smart man. No. That is Rajasic smartness. People don't know Sattvic smartness. Sattvic smartness is those people who can think about win-win situation, where I will be able to achieve what I want without compromising, and in that is the good of me and others and everybody. Stephen Covey calls it as win-win. Win-lose is Rajasic smartness, and lose-lose is Tamasic. It is not smartness, that is dumbness actually. So a good person is never a dumb person. To the extent we have faith in that selflessness, however small or little that is, We will grow based on that. And it is hard work to go against one's own ego. And you will not get support. And you will not find examples around you also. And that's where we say about conviction, that I must be convinced by this aspect that selflessness I am for my own sake, not for somebody else's sake. Because the more selfless I am, the more strong I am. It is not easy to go against one's own ego and selfishness. And even if we try to do it, people will say you are a fool. We keep listening, okay. Because anyway they will say what they have to say. But if I am convinced, I will live selflessly. And you see all the great people who have lived, they have lived like that. Gandhiji was always criticized for his ahimsa. Even today he is criticized. He was convinced and he lived his conviction. And how many people followed him? Not only in India, across the world. So if I am convinced, so that's where my clarity should be. That yes, selflessness is the strength. Detachment is the strength. And out of that strength, let me operate. You think about Arjun. Why did he collapse? Is it not because of raga? Because he had attachment to Bhishma and Drona, he collapsed. Why did Yudhishthir not collapse? It's very interesting to think about it. I had mentioned this in my earlier few sessions also. That for 12 years, Arjun spent so much of time in acquiring weapons to fight for that main day, and Yudhishthir spent time in cleansing the heart of the desire for revenge. Not that Yudhishthir did not have desire for revenge, but he cleansed his heart. He said, I will fight for the sake of dharma, not for the sake of revenge. And he cleansed his heart. He maintained his selflessness throughout. And that's why even at the end of the exile period, they were able to send Sri Krishna for peace treaty. When Arjun and Bhim, they were not for it. They are boiling that we've been done so much of injustice, we have to take revenge. And Yudhishthira has cleansed his heart. And Bhagavan himself went as a peace messenger. Why? Because that's what is the best thing to do. It is not succumbing to weakness. But for the sake of peace, if one has to let go of a kingdom, it doesn't matter. So many lives are at stake. So Bhagavan himself went there to have, in a dharmic way, the peace treaty. But they were not interested in dharmic peace treaty. So then war became inevitable. And then on the day of the war, what happens? Arjun collapses. The only reason for his collapse was his raga and his kama. Nothing else. So to the extent we have kama and raga, we will become weaker. Yudhishthira literally means one who is very steady in battle. Even in the most difficult circumstance where life is at threat, one who remains steady. And who will remain so strong and steady is a person who is selfless and detached. So wherever we see selflessness, we should know that that's the expression of the Lord. When we see it in others also. Then the next line he says, Dharma aviruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. That, O best amongst the dynasty of the Bharat, the King Bharat, I am that desire which is not opposed to dharma. So in Vedanta it is not that desire should never be fulfilled. There are two levels in Vedanta. One is the level where the permissible or permitted desires are fulfilled. And while fulfilling them, one sees very clearly the limitation of desire. That how much energy goes behind fulfillment of a desire, and the result that is achieved is so temporary. And that again leaves an impression which makes me desire more. So while fulfilling those desires which are dharmic, I must be able to see their own limitation. Then I rise to the next level, which is desirelessness. So Vedanta is not saying that straight away become desireless. No, no, no. First of all, I don't know what is the difference between a dharmic desire and a adharmic desire. I should awaken my vivek to do dharma, adharma, vivek. What is right and what is wrong. And today we are living in such an age. The moment we try to say right and wrong, they will immediately say moral policing. Moral policing. And who gave the right to this moral police? Then we are going to come down to the level of animals. The glory of a human being is only the capacity to discriminate between right and wrong. And there are so many factors to know before we determine what is right and what is wrong. One cannot say that I feel like doing and it is individual freedom, so it is to be allowed. How can you ban? No way. It is not possible to live like that. So what is dharmic? What is right at a particular stage? So as a student, it is right for the student to pursue knowledge. And it is wrong for the student to bunk the college and not pursue knowledge and while away the time and energy, divert the mind. No, but I feel like doing. And anyway, how does it matter? And one can give lots of examples. Einstein did not cross 10 standard and this man did not do this and that man did not do this and Bill Gates does not know computer, programming, this, that. 100 things one can say, so I will also become successful like that. But then why waste money of the parents? So many other factors go into it. How to determine right and wrong. So he says if one cannot live at the absolute desireless level, at least I can live at the second level, where whatever is dharmic desire I can fulfill. No, but are not these dharmic desires changing by time? Some of them will change by time, but the eternal principle remains the same. Truth, integrity, selflessness, loving, sacrificing, forgiveness, these are eternal values which continue to remain. Externally, the expression may change. But if the expressions change in such a way that these basic values are going to get affected, then one is not doing the right change. Why? Because it is these values which make us humane and which also invoke our potential as a human being and which help us to rise higher and higher in life. If these values get affected by the desires, then I am just going to come down from a human level to a base, animalistic and a lower level. So whatever is permissible by dharma, dharma aviruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. So why is it said that greed is bad? Because that violates that dharma. When a person is acting greedy, one is taking so much more resources that are needed and depriving somebody else. Plus, one is hoarding with unfair means. With minimum effort, I want maximum result. Is that good for the person? Slowly that person is going to become tamasic. Potential is not going to manifest. There are so many such reasons when these universal values are prescribed that this is called dharma. And dharma is determined by many of these. The stage in life, the roles in life. So many parents are just sent out. How much the parents have done for the children and how much they have sacrificed for the children. When the child grows up and the parent has become old, now the child says, this is my time to live my life and to achieve my dreams, and the parents have become old, send them away to some old age home. One may say, no, that is my individual choice. Who are you to tell me this is right and wrong? But are we also not living in a society? Individual's behavior is going to set standards for the whole society. And especially the prominent people, how they do, what they do, that is going to set more standards. So if I don't understand this dharma properly and just fulfill any desire, then one is coming to animalistic level. And if I cannot drop all the desires and go above all desires, I will not realize the truth. So what is the middle approach is given here? That if I am not ready for the highest to be completely desireless, I don't have to be at the lowest level, where I fulfill any desire that comes to my mind without thinking of dharma and adharma. So many things in the name of being open and being free and being liberal are happening in our country since the last so many years and decades. And are we not seeing the direct consequences of all that in terms of so many harmful things that have increased? And yet we are only on that mode that okay, we are becoming more and more liberal and more open. So that Bhagavan says here that this last line is not a license to indulge. That okay, the Lord said He is the desire, so let me fulfill the desire. But He said very clearly, dharma aviruddha. Whatever desire is not opposed to dharma. And there are so many such desires which can be fulfilled and where one can be happy. Vedanta is not saying don't eat good food, don't listen to good music, don't enjoy life. Fulfill all those desires, but do it in a dharmic way. And the purpose actually is not to fulfill desire for the sake of fulfilling desire. The purpose is actually to fulfill desire in a dharmic way so that we rise above desire. So how do I practice this line? I can find out what all desires that I am harboring and indulging in, which are prohibited desires, which I also know are prohibited. And first I should stop practicing those or indulging those. Now one important thing here to know is something may be prohibited. It need not be that when I indulge in that desire, it is what we call it, unethical. There are professions which are called socially unethical professions. They are not illegal, but they are unethical. So alcohol and tobacco and pan masala and all that, they are not illegal professions, but they are unethical, they are harmful. So many things which we do may not be wrong from morality standpoint, they may not be unethical, but they do harm. For example, if I keep up till late in the night, it is not unethical, it is not immoral, it is not illegal, but it is very harmful to me. If I don't have control over those kind of things which are harmful and I don't stop them, it will not be possible to get over other desires. Because the pleasure that one gets is more difficult to drop. So if I don't get up in the morning and go for a jog, there is nothing wrong in it. But then there is a harm that the body does not become fit, it does not have that enough stamina. So whatever are those desires which I am indulging in, which are not unethical, which are not illegal, which are not bad, but which are still harmful, first I should try to get over all of them. So laziness, if I am indulging in laziness, if I am indulging in procrastination, if I am indulging in simple gossip, I may say no, harmless gossip, no, it's okay. But there is nothing called harmless gossip. The gossip is already harming my own mind. Where I am talking low about somebody or something behind their back. That is not good. No, but why? Because then I have an insecurity that maybe somebody is talking like that about me. So, first and foremost, all that which is prohibited, which is not wrong, but which is harmful, I should get out of those which I am indulging in. Because only then I will have energy to apply in the other direction. Then I can apply it in those desires which are for my self-gratification but not opposed to dharma. So maybe desire for prosperity, desire for wealth, desire for fame, success, whatever. That also requires a lot of energy. And in that is my means dharmic or not. Wherever I am able to stop adharmic ways, I must stop. In the Bhajagovindam also, Shankaracharya says, Yal labhase nija karmo patam vittam tena vinodaya chittam. With one's own righteous effort, whatever one gets, one should be able to live contented and happy with that. Mudha jahihi dhanagama trishnaya. O deluded fool, drop this insatiable thirst for wealth. Kuru sadbuddhi. He says, live in a dharmic way and drop this manasivi trishna. You see, beauty of dharma is this, that when I fulfill a desire in a dharmic way, after some time I transcend that desire. But when I fulfill a desire in an adharmic way, that keeps me bound to that desire. So he says, dharma aviruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. And remember, he says, I am that desire. So in our culture, desire is never condemned. He is a very desirous person. Desire is not condemned. Prohibited desire is condemned. That this desire which is wrong, which is harmful to you, why are you indulging in that desire? Those desires which are harmful, those prohibited desires are condemned. Naturally, people will condemn poison or not. Anybody is going to praise poison? Poison is so nice. In life, everything must be tasted. So taste this also, little. No, nobody praises poison. What is harmful is harmful. Out. Not to see what is harmful as harmful is called moha. Delusion. So alcohol, smoking, non-vegetarian food, anger, selfishness, these are all harmful things. But if I don't see them as harmful, and if I not only don't see them as harmful, I see them as a source of pleasure. That is called moha. And then I have desire for them. And for that sake, I compromise with dharma also to get that. You think about it. In all adharmic ways, I earn the money and stock up my house with as old whiskey as possible. So I compromise dharma also, I compromise with my health also, I become tamasic also. That is absolute lose. So dharma aviruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. The point of the Lord saying this is that desire is also a divine expression in our heart. In Vedanta, desire is not condemned. He says that power in you to desire is the power of the Lord. And you can use that power in such a beautiful way. Is it not that all progress in this human life or in the world has happened because of a desire only? So desire is a divine power in us. Misusing that power, we harm ourselves, we harm other people. Bhagavan never condemns a person who has desire. He says, I am that desire in you. Just ensure that the desire is not fulfilled in a adharmic way, and nor is the desire by itself adharmic. Both are necessary. The desire should not be adharmic. Many times the desire is adharmic and I am trying to fulfill it in a dharmic way. How does it work? that I have a desire to drink, but I will work honestly and with that money what I get I will drink. That is not appropriate. Hard earned money is wasted. So many women get beaten up in their household because the man is a drunkard and the woman is working hard and all that money this fellow is wasting. So dharma aviruddho bhuteshu. He says that I am that expression of the desire in you, O Arjuna. So this verse is a very, very powerful verse. One can even memorize this verse. If a person learns to regulate one's desire from adharmic to dharmic, that desire also remains in control. Because dharma is a control there. But when dharma is not there, the desire becomes uncontrollable desire. That's why we become victims of desire. So a person who follows dharmic desire not only does not become the victim of the desire, can slowly transcend that desire. But a person who allows adharmic desires becomes a victim of the desire and goes down and down and down. Now, having said that, he ends the examples with this. And he says that all these things which have come in the world, they are made up of 3 gunas. Let us see. Ye chaiva satvika bhavaha rajasastamasaschaye matta eveti tan vidhi natvaham teshu te mai. So he says, Ye chaiva satvika bhavaha. Whatever is there in this world which has manifested from the Lord is pervaded by 3 gunas. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Matta eveti tan vidhi. All these have come from the Lord. But how did the 3 gunas come from the Lord? Bhagavan is one who is infinite. So he is going to introduce in the next few verses the whole concept of Maya. If you remember the first class we did that absolute truth which is infinite by itself doesn't create anything. But we are seeing the creation. So how did the creation manifest from the Lord? Technically, the infinite cannot produce anything. So then we say that yes, if we are seeing the creation, then that absolute infinite which is called Brahman, using the power of Maya, becomes Ishvara. And as the creator, he creates the whole universe where the universe manifests from him. Just like I use the power of talking and I become a speaker. In the same way, the Lord uses the power of Maya and creates the whole universe. So that Maya has 3 gunas. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. And just like the cause pervades the effect. If the pot, if there is mud and that is the cause, then the effect which is the pot, that will also have the mud. Same way, if the Maya has 3 gunas, then the whole creation also will have 3 gunas. So the whole creation is made up of the combination of 3 gunas. And Bhagavan says here that know that this whole creation has come from me, but I am in them. They are in me, I am not in them. Natvaham teshu te mai. They are in me, but I am not in them. This is a very, very so-called contradictory statement. They are in me, but I am not in them. How can the pot say that? How can the mud say that? They are in me, but I am not in them. Mud is in the pot, pot is in the mud. How can it be? They are in me and I am not in them. The whole world is in me, but I am not in it. How can the wave and the water, how can the water say that all the waves are in me, but I am not in the waves? How is that even possible? So if you want to know how it is, come tomorrow. You can think about it. It's a very beautiful shloka. And this verse is actually very, very powerful for meditation. The next verse, today's verse, what we are just seeing now, is very important in meditation. That's the attitude one must have. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Namaha.